Hello everyone, last talk before lunch, so I'll try to go as fast as I can. I'm from Cork, so that should come easy to me. Right, so I suppose what I really want to talk today is about how you actually kind of think about and trying to make the connections with the place you're actually trying to interpret, and then how do you actually trying to get people to meet on those places themselves. And effectively, that's kind of a heritage interpretation. Fáilte Ireland are kind of leaders in Ireland as regards heritage interpretation. They have some very fine advisory documents that are available online, and we do too, actually. We have a few things. And I think heritage interpretation, sorry about the light here, is about communicating the meanings of the place. It's very easy when we're kind of heritage kind of event organisers to go off and go, I have an idea for a walk or a tour or whatever, and just do it. But it's good maybe to take a moment to think about your place, what you want to do, really just take that moment to actually reflect upon the significance of the place and your own kind of points of view, your own kind of slants, prejudices, backgrounds, and how that could influence what you may do. This is Kilcash Castle between Kilkenny and Clonmel, and there's a very fine work going on there by the OPW, and they have an interpretive panel outside. It talks about the archaeology, it talks about the architecture. It doesn't talk what it actually was for. It was a medieval brothel, and you'll probably only remember that one fact from this whole talk that I'm about to do, all right? I'm aiming for a 2% retention rate on what you remember, and I might try one or two things to increase that. Anyway, that's the most important. That's the most interesting thing about this place, that it was actually a brothel for the Earls of Ormond. And sometimes we forget about that. Sometimes when we're custodians of the past, and we kind of sometimes sanitize the past, and often it's salacious things about those places that are the most interesting things about those places. Often I think we've all gone on tours of stately manors, and they've talked more about literally talked more about the wallpaper than they've talked about the people. And that's very boring, unless you're really into wallpaper, and there are those out there. Okay, so I think it's a good thing to do to kind of use basic interpretation principles in whatever you want to do, just to have that moment of pause and maybe have a process so you can actually kind of think through things. So why do you want to interpret? Do you want to interpret for kind of to promote the site, the awareness of the site? Do you want to kind of try to unleash its tourism potential? Do you want to make sure that people know about it so they have to care for it more? That's a big objective that we have in the Heritage Council, for instance. What are the site's meanings? Different one site may have different meanings for many different people, okay? Not just your own. You may have your own point of view, but you should consider possible other points of view that there may be about that site. That maybe a site may be contested. It may have several different meanings that actually may make it hard to manage that site. What are the audiences? I have kind of S's and kind of brackets here, because there's often several different audiences. And also, sometimes when you're trying to create an event, you often think that it's for everyone. If it's for everyone, it's usually for no one. And it usually isn't for everyone anyway. There's almost always kind of an audience or audiences you have in mind. So if you create an event with one or two different audience types in mind, you're more likely to have a better marketing strategy that will follow on from that as well. What are your key messages and stories, and what are your interpretive objectives? For me, when I do heritage interpretation, I really want people to value that place more, that they become advocates for that place. Because the heritage staff in the state, even at county level as well, we're minuscule. It's up to the people themselves to advocate for the past. We can help, but that's all we can do, really. But all right, I'm going to try a couple of things this talk that I've never really tried before. But whatever you do, try to use the 5 senses. So this is a kind of a way so that you can remember that. I want everyone to put their right hand up in the air. Just put your right hand up in the air and pinch your little fingers, give them a wave. Now you will remember to use the 5 senses. All right? So sight, taste, hearing, smell, touch. Okay? When you're trying to create events, try to think of those different senses, and then you'll create really immersive, interesting events that people will remember. Often when we go out to France or Italy or to the UK, we don't really remember what we see. We often remember the food, the good beer, the good wine, the smells. Those are the type of experiences. But often when we create heritage events, we forget about those senses. We just think about sight or hearing. But there are 5 senses, and it's worthwhile to bear that in mind. So this is one of the projects I was involved in a few years ago that we tried to use all 5 senses. It was a kind of a pop-up museum in Kilkenny City, the metropolis of Kilkenny. And it was an experiment that we came up with to get around the idea that every town should have a heritage centre, effectively. A lot of heritage centres, a lot of towns around the country, some are doing well, some are struggling very badly. There's a lot of pressure to have heritage centres in a lot of places. And some of those heritage centres only get 3,000 to 4,000 people a year. Really, you shouldn't be opening anything unless you're going to get at least 15, if not 20,000 people a year for it to be anyway kind of viable. Almost every heritage centre loses money, but the job of a heritage centre is often to bring in people into the town to be an economic driver for the rest of the town, but you need to bring the people in, okay? So as an experiment, we came up with this kind of pop-up museum. It was a temporary event, 2014, I think it was, or 15, where we did it over 4 Thursdays in August. We went to the site of highest footfall in Kilkenny. Often, heritage events are created to fail, not to succeed. Location is really important. You will always get a certain audience that will come to your event because they're interested in heritage, without any marketing really. You may market better, and you'll get a certain audience, a greater audience, but there's always an audience that will never go to a heritage event. But I think that virtually everyone is actually interested in heritage, and I'm sure you all think that yourselves. But it's a matter of actually making sure that heritage is in front of them. So this is an experiment we did. Kind of small enough. Now there was a cost to this, 4 Thursdays. There was capital costs that would come down, which wouldn't be there if we were to keep on doing this kind of same thing. Cost around 12,000 for 4 Thursdays. And what we did is that we had an archaeology tent, we had an archaeology dig, we had making Bronze Age pottery, we had kind of food, we had animators, we had lectures, and then 4 Thursdays we had over 3,000 people to go into a small tent, which is pretty good. 60% of which were foreign, but a large proportion were Irish, and a large proportion who had never gone into any kind of museum or cultural institution at all. And you'd be surprised how many people don't go into any cultural institution in this country. But again, we got them because we went into the place that they're going to be. So one of the unusual things we did is that we got some archaeological objects, nothing crazily special, to be honest. We worked with local archaeologists, Mary Teen and Colleen Driscoll were incredibly important partners in the whole endeavour. And we had a dog skull, we had a piece of medieval pottery, a piece of medieval kind of floor tile from St. Canice's Cathedral, rosary beads from a famine workhouse, and a little toy from a famine workhouse that was found in between the floorboards. Nothing spectacular, but what we did, we had archaeologists and volunteer archaeologists there to explain the importance of each different object, and we allowed people to actually hold these objects, which is really interesting. People can actually hold things, they get a real fantastic connection with that site. And we were telling a story about kind of the objects from the workhouse, and you could see people having an emotional reaction as they were holding the rosary beads in their hands. And then we would use that as a way of telling the story about the rest of Kilkenny. Because often the recent past is the past that actually is most relevant to people, not the Neolithic, not the Bronze Age, not the medieval period. But you can use the recent past as a way of actually going into kind of further afield. We got the Cartoon Saloon, which is a local animators company in Kilkenny, 3-time Oscar nominated, to come down and do cartoons about medieval Kilkenny for free over the 4 Thursdays. They were working with kids. It's using what you have, and we're very lucky in Kilkenny to have that resource, in fairness. Every lunchtime we had a lecture. The lecture was effectively a way for us to have our break, because we had so many people coming through the tent and going around the tent that we needed a break, and the lecture was a way for us to have our break. And we used a lot of resources that we could borrow from around the place. We got the stools from the craft council. The TV is my TV, I brought down. And then when we weren't using it for lectures, we set it up for just watching videos about local archaeological digs that were recorded for free, uploaded onto YouTube. It's a free resource. And then we had a corner for local archaeological books that people could read during the day if they just wanted to sit down and relax and learn more, aside from what was up on the interpretive panels. We had a Viking dig, two of the four Thursdays. The kids loved it. We also had, sorry, image is a bit bad, Bronze Age pottery making for the kids. Again, messing, getting dirty, kind of. These kids will brought home those Bronze Age pots. Now they're probably all gone to smithereens now, but it's a fantastic memory these kids will have, and that the parents can share with them as well. We also had we also got in partnership with local actors, and they did a play based on medieval life in Kilkenny, a 15-minute play that ran twice a day. Again, it was a fantastic way of just using what was local in your place. Every place has got a local amateur dramatic group. And food, at the launch, for the launch, I made medieval flatbread, very simple recipe, gave it out free to everyone, but we also we got these recipes from medieval recipes, and we gave it to all the stall holders on the market. The day we chose, the Thursday we chose, the location, the same location and time, but there's a farmer's market in Kilkenny. So we gave all the different stall holders recipes that were suitable for them. So when people came along and they bought their fish or bought their meat or vegetables, they got recipes, medieval recipes that can go off and make them with their own stuff. And also sometimes, that's me, by the way. We had after every Thursday we had a meeting. What went well, what didn't go so well. And one of the things we realized is actually we needed a fool to help bring people into the tent. And sometimes you gotta volunteer. And I have a recommendation. If you're gonna volunteer to be the fool, be a proud fool. Don't be a meek fool. Walk with pride through the middle of the street with your tights on. Then you are less embarrassed that way. And it worked. It was a very playful way to get people in and get them involved. We also had stocks that were on loan from Roth House, and people were taking photographs in the stocks. But just to my point about having things designed to fail or succeed, for Culture Night, we ran the same event, or a very similar event, in the Heritage Council, which is right by the medieval cathedral in Kilkenny. Same event, same quality, 40 attendees. Location. All right, so I'm going to move on to some smaller things that I did at no cost, all right? I often design things for myself. I'm a father now, so I design things for families now, but a few years ago, I wasn't a dad, so things revolved more around alcohol and having the crack, all right? So what I did, we had this medieval tavern tour where I wanted to kind of spread business amongst some of the pubs, some of the more kind of interesting pubs, and did some research on alcohol drink that would have existed in medieval Ireland. Charged people €15 a head. That just covered the costs of the alcohol and some mead. And we went to 4 pubs, and at every pub, I did a small little 10-minute kind of lecture on kind of medieval life. People loved it. Sold out. It was great fun. And another thing we did was actually we did a kind of I got in contact with this kind of sommelier and said, do you want to do something, a sommelier kind of session based on medieval varieties of wine that would exist in the Middle Ages? He's like, yeah, sure, why not? So we went to the Hole in the Wall, which is a kind of Renaissance era kind of pub in Kilkenny. And we did it for €15 a head again. That was sold out. And we gave some free samples of wine. And it was a fantastic atmosphere. Again, we're supporting the local pub, the Hole in the Wall. People are having some crack. They're learning about history, without even thinking they're learning about the past. They're just having some fun along the way. One of the things I want to kind of talk about is the relevance of heritage. When we talk about heritage events, a lot of things we talk about is kind of happy stuff. Everyone should have fun. Sometimes heritage can be a very good tool to actually have strong social debates about what's happening right now. So I'm going to do as a poetic interlude. So I'm going to read some poems. This is the second thing. I've never done it at a presentation. Basically, I want to show you how there can be inspiration in the most mundane and surprising of places. This is a book of Viking Age poetry from the 10th and the 11th century. So there's 3 poems, very short, I'm going to read out. One based on child soldiers, one based on immigration, and the last one based on the trials of old age. Okay? Don't worry, very short. They're translated into English. This is from a 6-year-old, okay, in the 10th century. My mother said to me that they would buy me a ship and lovely oars to go away with Vikings, standing in the stern, steering the glorious ship, then putting into ports, killing a man or two. That's a 6-year-old boy. So this is actually a poem based on an Irish girl in Dublin from Magnus Berlegs Olafsson, King of Norway, 11th century. Immigration, a concern we all have nowadays. What's this talk of going home? My heart is in Dublin, and the women of Trondheim won't see me this autumn. The girl has not denied me pleasure visits. I'm glad. I love the Irish lady as well as my young self. So again, issues we have, about movements of population. Movements of population have always happened. And finally, the trials of old age, okay? Issues with dealing with getting too old. From Egil Skillerhalgrimsson from the 10th century. I have a crick in my neck and tend to fall on my head. My trouser snake is soft, and my hearing's gone away. So what I'm trying to do with that smutty verses is to show how actually there is surprisingly really interesting and relevant nuggets of information all around you, and you don't know it. Like I grew up right beside a medieval church in my village in Granada, County Cork, that was run by the Knights Hospitallers, Crusader Knights. I didn't know that until I went to college. There's always amazing stories around you. You just have to go out and look. But heritage has a relevance to the past. Again, here we did in Kilkenny, did with a local artist, Gary Tynan, and we tried to kind of get people thinking about the relevance of the past and how things really haven't changed that much. So this is a stocks outside the courthouse. And this is 2011 we did this, just as the recession was really hitting hard. And we have recession 1311, a starving child. Recession 2011, a person who's obese, but they may be malnourished, which is happening nowadays. And then we have tourists scoffing themselves in the face. All right? And then finally, we have here the site of a town wall gate, and it's a kind of a soldier with an RPG grenade. A few of these were nicked, by the way, and they're up in some gardens. Next, I want to show you just a very quick, example from Sydney. A friend of mine did a tour of Sydney city centre, but he did it about early 1920s and 30s brothels and gangsters. Sold out. All right? And he had a switchblade, because the gangsters weren't allowed to carry guns or knives, but they're allowed to have a switchblade. That's how they fought each other. Switchblade wasn't a knife. So if a cop got them, they could say, the switchblade is for me to just do my shaves. But they all had these scars. That was the whole point. But he gave that switchblade to everyone. It was dull, but it was just, again, that tangible thing, and simple. Finally, this is actually a thing that Jeanette Lowe did, an artist in the Pearse Street flats. She did a kind of, where she got, the Dublin City Council basically gave her a flat for a few months. She did up like something from the 30s. It was basically, she was telling a story of the community of the flats. There was a kind of a complimentary exhibition going on in the National Photographic Library. But for me, as a professional, it was interesting because there's a big issue about heritage and gentrification, how heritage can be used to push communities out of city centres and middle-class, wealthy people to come in to replace them. So it was an interesting exhibition for me to think about the role about heritage and community and gentrification. Anyway. Finally, home stretch. How are we doing, Niamh?
We have another few minutes.
Good. All right. And I kind of want, just finally, just kind of the home stretch. I just want to really kind of just put it across to you that you have to look for what you have around you. Don't kind of look for inspiration, but look to what you have. This is a bridge in Buttevant in North Cork. A simple bridge, a medieval bridge on one side. One side is medieval, the other side is actually Georgian. I was there on a site visit looking at conservation work, and I go for a stroll afterwards. But what I did was actually, I took off my socks, rolled up my trousers, and I went through the Georgian barrel arch, and I came out through the medieval pointed arch. And it was like time travel. And I don't tweet that much, and I only have a couple hundred followers, whatever. You can follow me at Mannix, by the way, if you want to. And I just tweeted it, and I got 100 likes, 22 retweets, which is staggering for me. But it was just something so simple to take off my shoes, roll up my trousers, and it's almost like there was no traffic. It was almost like time travel. You go from the Georgian period back to the medieval period. Really simple, a very simple but incredibly kind of tactile thing to do, to get your feet wet and go into a stream. Anyway, just moving on to Talbot's Tower, a project we've been involved in Kilkenny, restoration work of the tower. Last year, the Kilkenny Arts Festival used the tower as a venue for one of their gigs. Basically, one-on-one concerts with a viola da gamba player. Fantastic, wonderful experience. You go in, there's no lighting. Your eyes adjust, you see this amazing ceiling, wickerwork ceiling just that reveals itself, and you listen to this amazing music. These amazing spaces, every community has these spaces. It's just looking at them, seeing how they can be made accessible, and figuring out really interesting ways of utilizing them. This is an example in York. It's a medieval church. They have medieval masses said in Latin, candlelit here. We did that in Loughrea, in the medieval abbey in Loughrea, and it was standing room only. Sometimes what's in front of you is the mundane, is so special that you can just use what you have. And people kind of look up and they go, oh yeah, that was amazing. But in Loughrea, they reused this medieval structure for a Latin medieval mass. And we had hundreds of people at it. But and again, the sun is setting, and you're there and you're standing, you receive the host, you hear the Latin. It's a very evocative, immersive experience. And again, those people will care more about that site than they would have before. In Portmagee, New Year's Eve is a crazy affair where they get a person who represents the old man, the old year. They parade him in torches through the village in County Kerry. They shoot him, and a young man emerges just as the new year is dawning. And it's fantastic, it's wild. There's actually a connection between Portmagee and French sailors who used to fish off the coast of Kerry. So there's a connection between France and Italy, France and Ireland. In Carlingford, they used for a whole week, they got people to sleep in a tower house, living as they did in the Middle Ages, using compost toilets. They got an Irish Times journalist to stay there for a few nights. Great coverage for the whole event. Again, didn't really cost that much, but it was a bit thinking, and they used what they have. They had a nighttime tour, a tour of Carlingford by night. And here is an event here in down in Bodifant again. One key thing, if you're first time running a reasonably sized event and you bring portaloos, make sure you clean the portaloos regularly, because oftentimes people forget that. So I'm just going to speed on through a couple more slides. This was an archaeological dig done for St. Mary's Church in Kilkenny. And they exposed archaeological remains, exposed skeletons. 1,000 people a day were visiting this site. I don't want to show the skeletons, it's bad practice, but the archaeologists were fantastic in explaining the whole importance of that place. 1,000 people a day. People are coming down from Dublin to look at these poor unfortunates. This is actually in Derry. Got 2,000 people to line to go around the line of the walls and do a Mexican wave. Then there was other people that came in. 6,000 people came to that event that day. A very simple event, but actually it cost a fair bit of money. But I love the thought process behind it, about making something fun, about something that may be kind of something that's quite austere to a lot of people. Almost two last slides. This whole theme is about making a connection. This is St. Michan's Church in Dublin. You go down and you shake the hand of the Crusader knight who's mummified. I know you can actually do that. You can actually shake his hand. It's turned into leather over the years. Again, using what's local, what you have yourself. We like to do events every year in the Heritage Council. We like to practice what we preach. Last year we ran a series of lectures and open days and all that kind of stuff. This year we're kind of thinking a bit bigger. I myself am going to do a lecture on the conservation lessons that can be learned from watching Only Fools and Horses, and we're all, which are many, but we're also thinking of doing. This is the kind of initial thought we had, and it may not happen, but doing a 24-hour walking tour of Kilkenny City, going to all the different cultural sites, the different kind of the holy wells, the different churches, and having a continuous 24-hour tour of Kilkenny, almost like a world record tour. But it's kooky, it's interesting, we're using what's local. We can make it cheap, we can make it expensive. We'll see how much money we have to do that. But anyway, that's it. Thanks very much. Any questions or? Sorry.
You were saying about you can show the skeleton skills of that practice, and then the next one you have the movement.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Sorry, just lay it in yourself.
You touched on the dig in Kilkenny and
Yes.
the artefacts that you had, including the rose rake from
Yeah.
the workhouse. And to me, I think that whole thing is very evocative. And we have, with all the workhouses, our the legacy of local famine. It's part of our heritage that we haven't really dealt with a lot. I think we are dealing with it more recent years. But is there any way to protect some of those workhouses as part of our heritage? Because I know there was one in Bar, as far as I know, was for sale in January time frame.
I don't know. They may be protected structures, so maybe listed underneath the kind of the Planning Development Act. But beyond that, I don't really know. Unfortunately, it is a kind of we're bad at doing the recent past in Ireland. Unfortunately, sorry, sir, and then sorry. I'll talk to you later on. Sorry.
You mentioned there about using the local tavern as a venue.
Yeah.
I think that's a risky one because I had a group of Australians a few years ago, and that was the start of the pub was originally owned by a post-famine immigrant who had returned and purchased this. That was the first stop of our, but I couldn't get him out.
Yeah. No. Yeah. They can be. We got. Well, I used the way I used to kind of to get people out of the tavern tour was that the next place is another free drink, and that's what we did. And we didn't. It was halves. We gave people halves, so it was half every half an hour.
I think you want to stay for a little while.
Well, when with the final pub, we had some meat, and they stayed there for the night. A lot of people did. Yeah, but you're right, though. It is a danger. And sir, you and.
Yeah, last summer we visited a workhouse in Kilkenny, restored. That's our in Mount Mannix.
Yeah.
There's a restored workhouse there, and it's open to the public. And I'm sure we could put it up on Facebook. But it was a High Nelly bicycle group.
Oh
They're based down there. I think they're based around Leaks or somewhere. I'm not too sure.
There's a place in Durrow.
Durrow,
Yeah.
that's right. And they run an event, and they ended up at the workhouse, and they stayed there overnight, maybe 2 nights. And we were there for me one night, but we didn't know about getting to stay, so we weren't prepared to sleep over. So this time we did.
Oh, good.
Just to say that that's going on there also.
Thanks very much. I think last question. Last one. So, the gentleman, someone put their hands up there? No? Okay. No, I think we'll end at that. Sorry, guys. We can talk to me later on. All right, during lunch. All right.
Yeah. You have an hour for lunch.